Hi, my name is Dr. Fox. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Texas. And in this video, we're going to talk about, is there love in narcissistic relationships? Now, when we talk about narcissistic relationships, we're not only talking about romantic relationships. We're talking about parental relationships, sibling relationships, work relationships. So in this video, we're going to go over each aspects of those, as well as define what narcissistic relationships are. So we're going to examine this love in these narcissistic relationships. And can you love a coworker? Sure, you can care a lot about them. Of course, you can love a sibling. Of course, you can love a parent. Of course, you can love someone else, a partner, whoever it may be. So we're going to define narcissism in romantic relationships, if narcissists can love, and how this relates to narcissistic parents. So I want you to stick with me. We're going to get into it and like, share, and subscribe. And here we go. Now, narcissistic relationships are often characterized by power struggles, manipulation, and an unhealthy lack of empathy. In these relationships, the narcissistic partner has an inflated sense of self-importance and a deep need for admiration from their partner, or the other person. Doesn't have to be their partner. Now, they're often controlling and overly critical in these situations, and they often lack empathy for their partner's feelings and needs. And when we talk about empathy, it's important to realize that we don't really see an inability for empathy in people that are along the narcissistic spectrum, people that have narcissistic traits. What we see is that it's almost as if they're trained or it's habitual not to engage in empathy. Now, narcissists often seek relationships that are based on codependency. So their partner's dependence on them provides them with validation, support, and admiration. Now, this dynamic can be damaging to the other person, and the narcissist's behavior can lead to feelings of rejection and worthlessness. And if it's a parent, and I have a lot of videos on children of narcissistic parents and being a narcissistic parent and managing that relationship, and that rejection and unworthiness, that worthlessness, can really stay with that person for a really long time. And it can really impact the trajectory of their life, the choices they make, and the partners that they seek out. So it's really important to be aware of these particular two outcomes from being in narcissistic relationships. So it's important for people in narcissistic relationships to recognize the signs and seek professional help with a knowledgeable mental health provider to help break those unhealthy patterns. So let's now take a look at, can narcissists love? Narcissists are capable of displaying loving behaviors, but their love is often conditional, manipulative, and self-serving. Narcissists often use love and affection as a means of gaining control, and their love can be fleeting. It doesn't tend to stick around. As soon as things turn negative, they're out of there. They're gone. See you later. Right? Now, they may show love and affection when it serves their purpose, but quickly withdraw when it doesn't. They also tend to be very self-focused, so their capacity for loving others tends to be limited. While narcissists may be capable of loving, they often lack the capacity, or they don't utilize the ability to empathize and connect deeply with another person, making true and lasting love difficult. And this is something that a lot of my clients that I've worked with who have narcissistic parents or partners often struggle with, that they feel like they get little crumbs of love along the way. And that can sometimes be very purposeful and tactical by the individual along the narcissistic spectrum. Usually, the greater the degree of narcissism, the greater the degree of impaired insight. And that can be really problematic because we see that it's not so much volitional, but it becomes habitual, just as I mentioned a moment ago, is that they've learned to be sort of dismissing about relationships, reluctant to engage in those relationships. So can they love? They can actually. They can do that, but perhaps they haven't learned the skill or the method in order to do it. Or, and we're going back to those individuals with a high degree or severe or extreme degree of narcissism, they just don't care enough to learn about loving others. But a lot of times, many individuals who are narcissistic, and I found this to be true in my practice and working with these individuals for a long time, that it's often self-doubt, fear, vulnerability, and a lot of questioning of their own sense of self-worth that prevents them from engaging in showing love and learning about how to do that. So instead, they split and they go to the far end of it and say, well, emotions are ridiculous. Emotions are crazy, and love is just a huge waste of time because everybody's full of it and everybody's out for themselves. And those are those narcissistic and self-focused perspectives that we see that gets played out in maladaptive narcissistic behaviors over and over and over again. But let's also talk about narcissistic parents too. Narcissistic parents are often highly controlling, authoritarian, and unempathetic. They often have an inflated sense of self-importance and an excessive need for admiration from their children. They may seek to manipulate and control their children's behavior in order to maintain their own power and sense of superiority. Narcissistic parents often have unrealistic expectations of their children and can be critical, belittling, and demeaning when their children do not meet their expectations. And often the individual, the narcissistic parent, that expectation is so unfathomable, which is that every time you get up to the plate, it's a home run. Every time that you go up to the tee, I'm just using sports as an analogy, right? Every time that you go up to the tee, in golf, that you're going to hit a hole in one. It's just not possible. And then in school, you get nothing but 100s. And then if there's ever extra credit, you get the 110. So it's this realistic that no one would ever be able to live up to. Narcissistic parents may also be dismissive of their children's feelings and needs and may not recognize or accept their children's autonomy. And this is that need to establish and maintain control. Because if the child starts to make their own decision, or the individual, because sometimes it's with adults too, that if that individual starts making their own decision, they may realize that that narcissistic parent is wrong, that that narcissistic parent doesn't know everything, that they're not perfect, that they're fallible. And for narcissists, for individuals along that narcissistic spectrum, that if someone knows they're fallible, meaning really they're human, then they're broken, worthless, and unable to provide anybody. And that means that they are unlovable. And it only validates probably what they heard growing up or their own fear and beliefs about themselves. Now, it is important for children of narcissistic parents to recognize the signs and to seek help with a mental health provider in order to break those unhealthy patterns that they learned from their parents growing up. We got to build insight into those patterns. And this is true for everybody when we look at can narcissists love and what's that repercussion of being in those relationships. We have to first build insight, recognize what's going on inside of us. What are those old patterns and beliefs and behaviors that we learned and that we keep falling into that are so destructive of our life, that continue to hold us back from going forward? Got to have that insight. Then we got to learn those adaptive strategies and unlearn those maladaptive strategies. Then we can start to do things differently. Then we can facilitate and grow new patterns that are adaptive and healthy. And that's how we get to those love relationships. That's how we get to those stable relationships. And it's totally possible to do it. So I hope you found this helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment as well. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.